The Imperial Fists are one of the first founding chapters of the Space Marines, and were originally the 7th Legion of the Legio Astartes, raised by the Emperor himself from across Terra during the Unification Wars. After the Emperor conquered Terra with his gene-forged Thunder Warriors, he continued his dominance of the Techno-Barbarian tribes with his newly created Legio Astartes. With blood and fire he tamed Terra, bringing order and enlightenment where there had been none before. It was this transformation that the 7th Legion was made to protect. The first battalions of the 7th Legion were raised across Terra as shown by their earliest battle honor, Roma, while many other legions drew their recruits from a particular source. The flesh of the 7th Legion came from Terra as a whole. Even in domains where other legions had the right of tithes, the 7th Legion took some of the youths as initiates. Often these would be those who exhibited the greatest capacity for endurance both in mind and body. Many slow to talk but quick to act. Why so many of such a wide pool of recruits would be similar is unclear. The processes used to activate the 7th Legion's gene seed seem to have inflicted intense pain, and so perhaps it was a purposeful selection of stock, suited to surviving the process. It is also possible that a pattern of recruitment once formed perpetually until it was tradition. No matter the reason, the grim nature of those recruited into the 7th Legion was well suited for their use. In war, the 7th Legion was concerned with conquest. While all the Emperor's forces fought and died to expand the Imperium, many saw only part of the greater vision. Defeat the enemy, tear down his stronghold, break his belief, and still you will have a land that could turn against the Imperium in the future, or provide other enemies with a weakness to strike at. Victory was not enough. To conquer, one had not only to defeat one's enemies, but to hold the fruits of their victory. This philosophy underpinned every action of the 7th Legion. In attack, they would pay the price in their own blood to secure victory, and once they had victory, they would begin to consolidate what they had taken. This pattern can be seen time and time again in later conquests of ancient Terra. It was the 7th Legion which broke the cities of the Crystal Sea, and then raised the fortress of the 5th Circle from their ruins. In the ice-wrapped pinnacle of the Himalayan mountains, they lost 3 battalions to secure and defeat of the witchery of the Wind's Caller clan. But the first Imperial bastions began to rise against the cold sky within solar days of that victory. In the first decade of their existence, the Imperial Fist raised 600 citadels upon the land of the conquered. It is said that the dead of the Legion lie still in the foundations of each, their skulls and blood mingled with the stones and mortar of their walls. With these bastions pinning the conquered land to the Imperium, order would spread amongst the people of their domain. The old ways would change, fall, or be replaced by the new, and if they did not, then the looming fortress would answer the question of what the response would be to rebellion. The 7th Legion were more than builders. At their root, they were the most direct expression of the Emperor's design of unity amongst humanity, for they were crusaders. While fortresses and ordered domains sprang up in their wake, the 7th Legion would never linger, but were always moving on, invading uncompliant domains and pushing the frontiers even as they reinforced what they had already taken. Massed shock assaults using the full array of weaponry within the Legion was the typical way the 7th Legion approached war. Multiple battalions often took to the field in mass, breaking enemies with hammer-blow force. On the plains of Kenstar, the 5th Battalion of the 7th Legion broke the lines of the Trici with an arrowhead of 50 war machines. It is said that the dust cloud threw up in their wake blotted out the sun. In the tunnels of Galabas, they cracked the crust above the buried city and dropped into the exposed tunnels beneath while the explosions were still echoing across the mountains. But always in the wake of the destruction they brought, they replaced what they had broken with something stronger. It was from these early conquests that the 7th Legion acquired its name. When many looked on the lands they had taken, they said that it was as if the hand of the Emperor had descended and gripped with an unbreakable fist. The description of the service done by the 7th Legion must have pleased the Emperor, for he personally decreed that they would be known from then on as the Imperial Fists, and bestowed on them the right to bear the laurels of victory as part of their heraldry. Dutiful and tactful as ever, it is said that the renamed Imperial Fist accepted their honor in humble silence. When the Emperor was reunited with Rogal Dorn, he regained not only a lost son, but the strength of a star-spanning society already forged into a tool of war. Dorn greeted the Emperor at the helm of the enormous starship constructed during the Dark Age of technology, called the Phalanx, that he had discovered within the Inuit's region of space. Dorn became the 7th of the 20 Primarchs who had been found by their father. The Emperor welcomed Dorn as his long-lost son and returned the Phalanx to his care, transforming it into the mobile fortress monastery of the 7th Space Marine Legion that was also turned over by the Emperor to Dorn to lead, since all of his Astartes had been created using Dorn's own genetic template. Dorn commanded the 7th Legion and its expeditionary fleet with peerless devotion and military genius. It was said that he possessed one of the finest military minds amongst the Primarchs, ordered and disciplined, but still inclined to flashes of zeal and inspiration. Few integrations of Primarch and Legion were as swift or as complete as the one between Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fists. The ideals of the Imperium and the purpose of the Great Crusade fit with Dorn's outlook and drive, and the warriors of the Imperial Fists were exemplars not only for everything that he had built in the Inuit cluster, but everything he had dreamed of for his future. From the first moment Dorn met his Gene Sons, he demanded of them everything that he would ask of himself. It is said that when he met Legion Master Matthias and veteran contingents of the Imperial Fists, he said nothing, maintaining his silence even when they had knelt and pledged him fealty. Only when he had observed them in battle did he break his silence and speak to them directly. He said that they had much to do and more to learn. To Matthias he gave a single word of thanks for his service and named him High Castellan of Inuit. Such an honor was also a deep duty, for the next order he gave was to raise 30 regiments of new Imperial Fists from the Inuit system. Over the next 16 Terran decades, the Imperial Fists fought in the burning edges of the Great Crusade. Relentlessly they pushed from warzone to warzone, were honored by each of their brother legions, and rose high in the esteem of many. In their methods of war, the ways of Inuit and the echoes of the 7th Legion victory combined. Just as on Terra, they fortified and built to secure what they had conquered, but just as before, they did not linger to rule their conquests. While a Castellan with a household of warriors might remain to maintain its defenses, they did not administer or draw up any enforced law, for they were warriors of the Imperium, not its masters, and they existed to serve in war and die for its survival. What they did take from all the lands they conquered were recruits. A famous example would be the Imperial Compliance Action of Necromunda, where the Imperial Fists won a major victory against the Orcs on the ash wastes of the Hive World. The Hive Lords consented to recruits being drawn from their population in gratitude. A fortress chapel was duly consecrated, but the Imperial Fists were there as esteemed guests, not masters. Rogal Dorn asked no special rights on the worlds where the Imperial Fist recruited. Some Primarchs, such as Perturabo, took every opportunity to garrison a world for their legion and claim its tithes. Dorn is famously recorded as saying, "I want recruits, not vassals," and was always satisfied to keep the legion as a military unit with none of the civil or political responsibilities that came with governing a legion homeworld. During the Great Crusade, the Imperial Fists acted as a strategic reserve of the Emperor's force due to their ability to rapidly redeploy to the battlefield aboard phalanx. They made use of detailed planning and as such were soon found to be supreme urban fighters and siege specialists. After several campaigns and thousands of conquered worlds being brought into the Imperium, the Emperor returned to Terra to build a capital from which he would run his new empire. He took the Imperial Fists with him to set up as his Praetorians, and charged Dorn with the construction of the Imperial Palace, something that did not go unnoticed by the other Primarchs. Perturabo flew into a rage upon hearing that Dorn thought the Imperial Palace would be proof against any assault by even a mighty siege masters, as the Iron Warriors, and he unleashed a torrent of accusations against his brother Primarch, so unfounded that the onlookers from his own legion were dumbstruck. After this outburst was reported to Dorn, the two Primarchs rarely spoke, neither legion serving in the same campaign again. The Imperial Fists were ever at the Emperor's side, and the Iron Warriors were always a part of Horus's vanguard. As the Great Crusade progressed, the Imperial Fists had risen high in honor and in the favor of the Emperor. Ever dependable, they were often used to reinforce flagging campaigns, to hold crumbling fronts and break deadlocked sieges. The Emperor also frequently called on both Rogoldorn and his sons to fight beside him, bestowing this honor on the Imperial Fists more than any other legion. When the Imperial Fists descended on Ophelion VIII, the Emperor led the assault at the head of 100 custodians and 100,000 Imperial Fists. Again, during another campaign, the Emperor called on not only Horus and the Luna Wolves, but Dorn and the Imperial Fists, to form his vanguard in breaking the Shrouded Dynasties. The Emperor also used Dorn to ensure war and Imperial compliance was achieved according to his wishes and wisdom. Time and time again, in ways large and small, the Imperial Fists acted at the direct order of the Emperor. Other Primarchs and their legions blazed a more brilliant trail, or spread the Imperial truth on more worlds, but to many the Imperial Fists were the rock on which the foundation of the Imperium was built. High in favor and honor though they were, the Imperial Fist status did not sit well with some of the other brother legions. The animosity between the Imperial Fists and the Iron Warriors was well known, but Perturabo and his legion were not alone in their resentment. Though few reached the Lord of Iron's pinnacle of spite, others were upset at the trust placed on the Imperial Fists. Dorn's nature did not calm these matters. Truth speaking, his manners often aggravated his peers as much as they drew admiration. It was perhaps his quality which caused the Emperor to pass over Dorn as War Master when he withdrew from the Great Crusade. Before the Imperial Fists could arrive on Terra in full complement, the events of the Horus Heresy overtook them. Stranded for some considerable time by severe warp storms, the Imperial Fist fleet eventually discovered the badly damaged Loyalist Death Guard frigate, Eisenstein, and so learned of Horus's betrayal. At first, Dorn did not believe Captain Nathaniel Garro, and nearly killed him when Garro said that his brother Primarch Horus was a traitor to the Imperium and the Emperor. Rogoldorn was eventually convinced by several members of Eisenstein's survivors of the Isstvan III massacre. Dorn therefore dispatched the bulk of his legion to the Isstvan system on a war footing. He himself returned to Terra with his veteran Space Marine companies to bring word of the terrible events personally to the Emperor of Mankind. For those still loyal to the Emperor on the Red Planet, their salvation arrived in the form of a great Imperial expeditionary fleet. Malkador the Sigillite, the regent of Terra, charged Rogoldorn and his Imperial Fists with a mission of the most vital importance, to secure the Forges of Mars for the Imperial war effort. Dorn informed the Sigillite that he would send his legion's champion, the first captain, Sigismund, 4 companies of Imperial Fists, and a large force of Imperialis Auxilia soldiers to secure the Forges of Mars. Within the northern hemisphere of the Red Planet lay an arc of loyalist control, the important munitions manufactorum of Mundus Gamma and Mundus Aculum. Within these two vast industrial complexes, the Mechanicum fabricated the weaponry and power armor of the legions of the Space Marine. Dorn gave First Captain Sigismund the task of capturing and holding a vital set of industrial complexes on Mars. The forges of Mundus Aculum and Mundus Gamma alone produced the bulk of the armor and weapons of the Astartes. Dorn intended for his force to strike there and capture those forges, and once they were occupied, the Imperial Fists and their allies would push outward and secure the others. Sigismund's companies landed on Mundus Aculum, as the rest of the Imperial expeditionary fleet was fighting all across the surface of Mars. After a rapid deployment under fire in the shadows of Pavonis Mons, 13 companies of the Imperial Army's Sancturian Hoplites advanced on the traitor lines surrounding the forge of Impulivian Maxima. Further south, 2 of the companies of Imperial Fists and 4 regiments of Jovanian Grenadiers, nearly 15,000 Imperial Army soldiers in total, under the command of the Imperial Fist captain Camba Diaz, made planetfall on Mundus Gamma Forge Complex. Nothing of the Imperial Fist's mission to Mars panned out the way it was expected. Camba Diaz and the Jovanian regiments soon became embroiled in a fight for their lives at Mundus Gamma Forge, and the Centurion Hoplites, companies tasked with breaking the siege of the Maximilian Forges, had been repeatedly turned back by the horrifying altered weapons of the Dark Mechanicum. Though the fighting was desperate, Camba Diaz eventually secured the armor forges and the ammunition silos, but his company was outnumbered 100 to 1. The traitor Chrome's troops pushed him back to the landing fields, and his losses were grievous. Sigismund's company had descended upon Mundus Aculum, not knowing whether they would have to fight to secure the forge, but it was a relief to find that the fabricator Locum Zagreus Cain still held true to the Imperium. Sigismund secured vast quantities of munitions for transport back to Terra, including nearly 12,000 suits of Mark IV power armor and twice as many Astartes weapons. Despite Locum's servitors working at full capacity, it still was not rapid enough, for Sigismund's ship's master informed him of a sizable enemy force closing in, composed of infantry, armored vehicles, Scutari, and at least 2 traitor Titan legions comprising of nearly 60 war machines in all. Sigismund's desire to wreak a bloody vengeance on the heads of those who had rebelled against the Emperor conflicted with his necessity of the mission his Primarch had given him to secure the vital armor and weapons of Cain's forge that would be needed to defend the Imperial Palace at a later date. Reluctantly, he knew that he must stay true to his mission, for the forces arrayed against the Imperial strike force were simply too many, and his orders did not allow for the pursuit of the futile gesture of defiance. Locum Cain warned the Imperial Fist's first captain that if both the Mundus Aculum and Mundus Gamma forges fell, the Imperium would have no way of replenishing the combat losses they would sustain in any meaningful way. After barely a few hours worth of fighting, both Mundus Aculum and Mundus Gamma were burning, with vast swaths of their industrial machinery and manufacturing capabilities destroyed. The loss of such irreplaceable technology and knowledge would be felt by the Imperium for many millennia to come. Like comets launching from the surface of Mars, the Imperial starships fled from the heavens. Astartes and Imperial army vessels jolted in the sky in their haste to depart the Red Planet. Barely 1,000 loyalist warriors were able to escape from the planet's surface before the Manufactorums fell into the hands of the traitors. The desperate rearguard action of the Astartes and other loyalists on Mars, and the sacrifice of many thousands of lives, at least had secured tens of thousands of suits of newly fabricated Mark V and Mark VI Space Marine power armor, and other vital materials that would ultimately prove to be the edge for the forces of the Imperium in the campaign against the traitor legions of Horus Lupercal. As the Horus heresy raged throughout the galaxy, Lord Dorn fortified the defenses of the Throne World and the Sol System for the inevitable push on Terra that the War Master of his traitor legions would make. Terra had been made a fortress, but it was a fortress with 2 walls, the wall within and the wall without. The wall within was the gate from the Imperial dungeon to the Emperor's mysterious great project. Here stood the Master of Mankind himself, at the head of the Custodians and the Sisters of Silence. The wall without were the spheres of the defense that extended from the literal walls of the Imperial Palace to the darkness beyond the edge of the solar system. On this outer wall stood the Praetorian of Terra, Rogel Dorn, and his Imperial Fists. If either wall fell, then everything would be lost. The Imperial Fist defense of the solar system was divided into spheres. All the defenses and forces within each sphere was commanded by a senior Imperial Fist raised to the rank of Lord Castellan by Rogal Dorn. The first sphere was the outmost and came under the command of Sigismund. The second was commanded by Helbrick, while the third, under Ephraid, enclosed the Martian battlesphere and had the traitorous Dark Mechanicum tech priest fully bolted in. Terra was marshaled by Lord Dorn himself. The Imperial Fist forces in the solar system were divided between each of these commands, along with thousands of more ships, void defenses, and millions of mortal troops, separated by millions of kilometers. Signals sent between the forces assigned to each sphere took hours to reach each other. When the traitor invasion finally came, word was passed by a single astropathic flare, a psychic message passed as fast as thought that had said the traitors had come to the wall of Solar. Fire on the mountains, the Solar campaign had begun. Under the tireless efforts of the Imperial Fists, the Sol system had become a fortress, each strata of the solar system being turned into a perfectly organized defense zone to break the War Master's eventual assault. Unfortunately, within the network of operatives, the Alpha Legion had the means and opportunity to transfer material and personnel between sectors. Given the Alpha Legion's tendency to prove its own superiority, it would not simply suffice to break open Terra's outer defense, but to humiliate the 7th Legion. They would have to infiltrate the most secure location of the entire galaxy, the Imperial Palace, activating assets that had been dormant and hidden on Terra for several decades. The Alpha Legion would eventually succeed where all others had failed before, infiltrating several agents within the Imperial Palace, and especially the Invincitorary, where great statues had been erected to commemorate the Great Crusaders' great generals, the Primarch of the 20 Legions. 2 pillars had stood empty for a long time, the statues adorning them destroyed when their representative owners were cast to oblivion and their history erased. The lost Primarchs, but the 9 statues of those Primarchs having turned against the Emperor had merely been covered up. This was to be the Alpha Legion's target. Infiltrated legionnaires succeeded into penetrating into the Invincitorary and destroyed all the statues except 2 of them, those of Alfarius and Rogal Dorn. Intended as both a challenge and a message, this feat was deliberately kept secret from the other organizations within the Imperial Palace. Even the Regent of Terra, Malcador the Sigillite, and the Emperor's own bodyguard, the Lego Custodes, were forbidden to enter the Invincitorary and witness the shaming of the Imperial Fists. What truly occurred there remains a well-guarded secret, one only kept by Rogal Dorn himself and his bodyguards. By what means the Sigillites still discovered the presence of the Alpha Legion on Terra remains a mystery, but Rogal Dorn was adamant that he would deal with the treacherous 20th Legion in due course. Shortly after his act of sabotage, an Alpha Legion fleet, led by Hero Master Kelm Silinos, attacked the Sol System's outer defenses and managed to even capture several of Pluto's moons, which constituted the heart of the outermost defense perimeter. In order to prepare for Horus's advance toward Terra, the Alpha Legion was charged by the War Master to carry out vital acts of sabotage and preparation, which would plunge the solar system into complete chaos. Though heavily defended by the Imperial Fists, led by the Praetorian of Terra, Lord Dorn himself, the Primarch Alfarius aborted his flagship, Alpha, led his fleet toward the Sol system. He managed to successfully infiltrate the outer defenses of the system by putting himself and the entirety of the personnel within his fleet into stasis. Meanwhile, the Alpha Legion fleet approached at a minimum speed, powering down to bare minimum, in order to reduce their overall heat signature. Thus, it took an entire year for the Alpha Legion fleet to drift toward Sol and successfully reach the outskirts of Terran's defense undetected, as warp travel had been strictly forbidden. Meanwhile, Alpha Legion Sparatoi, augmented and highly adept human agents, as well as Alpha Legion operative teams activated throughout the Sol system. These sleeper cells had been planted years earlier before the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, and upon activation performed their primary functions of sowing destruction and diversionary terrorist acts, causing panic and anarchy. Multiple acts of murder and sabotage were conducted on multiple planets to distract the beleaguered Imperial defenders from the Alpha Legion's true objective, Pluto, the linchpin of the Loyalist surveillance network within the Sol System. As Lord Dorn was distracted by his adversary's attack across the system, Alfarius' fleet, comprised of more than 200 vessels led by the Alpha, struck Pluto and its moon, Charon, Erebus, Nyx, Styx, and finally Hydra. As the fleet arrived, further uprising instigated by the Alpha Legion team erupted across the Sol System. The Alpha Legion's primary objective was Hydra, a fortress moon that orbited Pluto. That was a major astropathic monitoring station. Alfarius himself led a team of Alpha Legion warriors in the attack on the moon. Meanwhile, the Loyalist defenders, led by First Captain Sigismund, had just 30 ships to defend against the massive Alpha Legion fleet. Due to the unexpected and brutal assault, and severely outnumbered Loyalist fleet was badly mauled by fire ships hidden among the Alpha Legion's fleet to wreak havoc on the Imperial Fist's defenders. The captured fortresses of Moon Erebus rained down deadly fire upon Charon, Nyx, and Styx with heavy weapons. Despite facing overwhelming odds, the Imperial Fists stood their ground in the face of the Alpha Legion's overwhelming assault. Meanwhile, Archimus, Lord Dorn Master of the Huskarls, was eventually able to discover the Alpha Legion's true intention to sabotage Hydra. During the fighting, Archimus led a series of his contingents into a daring assault upon the Alpha Legion force, led by Primarch Alfarius himself. In the subsequent fighting, the bodyguards were killed and Archimus was left mortally wounded. All seemed lost as the battle seemed to swing in the favor of the traitor forces, but miraculously, the Imperial Fist's mobile star fortress Phalanx, led by Dorn himself, arrived with a massive Imperial Fist's fleet in tow. They were boasted with additional reinforcements from the Armada Imperialis. Ultimately, the competing gravity wells throughout the Sol System, the Imperial Fist's fleet managed to arrive quickly by slingshotting itself toward Pluto. The Imperial Fist reinforcements immediately pacified the captured guns of Erebus as Lord Dorn led his Hurskal in an assault upon the astropathic chamber on Hydra. Dorn and his remaining bodyguards teleported directly into the locked chamber and soon joined battle against Alfarius and his elite Larinian Terminators. Archimus looked on helplessly as the two Primarchs fought one another in an epic life-or-death duel. When Alfarius was about to impale Dorn with his pale spear, the now dying Archimus grabbed the hilt of the weapon and deflected it harmlessly into a non-vital area of Dorn's chest. This gave Lord Dorn the opening he needed to grab the weapon's hilt, and using his deadly chainsword, Storm's Teeth, he sliced through Alfarius' wrists, severing his hands from his arm, before slashing the former brother across his chest, and then impaling him with his own spear. Finally, Lord Dorn finished off Alfarius with a deadly chop of his mighty chainsword into the top of his skull. With the death of their Primarch, the Alpha Legion fleet withdrew and retreated from Pluto. At the moment of his twin Primarch's death, Omegon sensed the demise of his sibling and became distant. Shortly thereafter, he was notified that the War Master demanded that Alfarius speak with him so that he could know the status of the Alpha Legion's attack on the solar system. Like he had done many times before, Omegon immediately took upon himself his brother's name and permanently assumed the mantle of the Primarch of the 20th Legion.
Oh, if you could put my